Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for Why Feel Good Isn't Good Enough, Building Highly Effective Teams. I'm Jessie Beringer, Head of Marketing for 3D Group, and I'll be facilitating our session today. Joining me to discuss team effectiveness is 3D Group Senior Consultant Ann Whiting. Ann has over 2 decades of consulting and business experience in a variety of industries. She's held human resource leadership positions with the Coleman Company, Spirit Aerosystems, and LSI Logic, managing staffing functions, performance management systems, and leadership development programs. And has also worked as a management consultant for Right Management and Kaiser Permanente, coaching top-level talent, facilitating strategic planning, and providing change management consulting. Ann recently facilitated a team effectiveness retreat at the Andersons, which she'll be sharing more about today. She has a master's in IO psychology from Alliant International University. Ann, I'll hand it over to you to get started.
All right, thank you, Jessie, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining us today. So we're all familiar with team building events, and team building tends to conjure up a lot of images for us, maybe perhaps even like the one here on the screen, where you have a team that's kind of possibly learning a dance and appears to be having fun. And most of us have participated and maybe even facilitated a team building retreat where we have like a great time and you experience this temporary boost in morale and you discuss and make plans, but that doesn't necessarily translate back into the workplace, and it doesn't translate into strategic advantage or permit us to really function more effectively as a team in the long run. So in today's webinar, I'm going to be sharing an approach to developing high impact teams that begins with assessing and coaching every team member in order to help each individual understand how his or her behavior is contributing to overall team effectiveness and which behaviors are hindering the effectiveness of the team. And then to go on and create commitments that develop the team's strengths, cohesiveness, and effectiveness day to day. So let's talk about why high impact teams are so important. Companies across the world agree that teams are essential in driving superior performance. In an Ernst & Young study of 821 business executives, an overwhelming majority, actually 84%, think that their organization's ability to develop and manage teams are going to be essential for their company's future competitiveness. And they also agree that teams are the best way to increasingly address complex business situations and problems. Teamwork is hard, and so what we know is that we love, and particularly US society loves to celebrate and glorify the individual, like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, LeBron James. We all do it. But our challenge is that individuals don't accomplish monumental achievements on their own. Success is really driven by teams. And take sports, for example. Great teams often have individual superstars, but winning teams are those teams that focus on teamwork, the drills, the plays, the practice, the trust, the communication. And without those, you lose, even with the best player in the world. So why isn't that same principle applied to business? Businesses tend to assume that if they recruit the best of the best and give them great tools, that the magic will just happen. But great people, even when you combine it with great technology, doesn't always equal team potential unleashed. Organizations today are built around teams, but what we know is that very few of those teams are high performing. Teams commonly face challenges such as poor communication, low levels of trust, lack of a shared vision or goals. And what we know is all teams create norms, and norms are those explicit or implicit behavioral expectations that drive how team members interact, how they communicate, how they make decisions, and basically just how they conduct themselves as members of the team. And those norms or patterns of behaviors or interactions can either support high performance or detract from high performance. And the other thing we know is that when teams develop these kinds of challenges, which again are quite common, team building is frequently used as an intervention. And so we often are called in to do team building. And it might even be typical team building. And so typical team building can range from spending time together socially, doing fun exercises like doing a ropes course, or even learning to dance like the image on your screen. Team building can also take the form of being more structured. So such as activities such as administering a personality inventory, such as the Myers-Briggs or DISC, for example. Typical team building probably also involves a facilitator. And so the facilitator might come in and administer a questionnaire evaluating team effectiveness, or they also might conduct interviews with individual team members to assess the team's functioning and then prepare a report, kind of compile that data, prepare a report, and feed it back to the team leader and the team in a group setting during a retreat. There are also off-the-shelf instructional guides that basically give you a ready-made diagnostic model and process that allows leaders and facilitators to conduct a ready-made retreat. And what we know about typical team building is that it has its challenges. So personality inventories such as the Myers-Briggs and DISC, they really do help team members understand their individual styles and how they contribute to group dynamics and how they impact group dynamics in a very general way. And while those self-administered instruments can provide value, it's really not the same as team members receiving direct observations from their fellow team members using firsthand data and helping them understand how they are perceived by their team members in real time. And by necessity, those off-the-shelf team retreats, and probably one of the ones that's in the marketplace that's very enjoying prevalence today is, for example, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So those retreats are in essence designed to be one size fits all. And to me, they're almost a little bit reminiscent of a cookbook, as in kind of here's an agenda and a process for team building when the team wants to spend 4 hours on it. So to even take that cooking analogy a little bit further, we all know it takes an experienced cook to evaluate recipes, to drift from the cookbook and modify the recipe. And in terms of team building, with those off-the-shelf retreats, why it's a solid framework, it's a good framework, you really need to be an experienced facilitator to depart from that instructional guide and consult to the team in real time. The vast majority of typical team building assessments ask participants to rate the team as an entity into itself. And those assessments contain questions like this. Our team takes risks when needed to achieve exceptional results. And what we see is the responses to this question are represented as an average across all team members. Now think about that in comparison to a team assessment that really looks at the individual. So in reality, teams are made up of individuals. There is an I in team. And it's going to be very different to complete this question, which is this individual takes risks when needed to achieve exceptional results, and then see those results displayed in a graphical format around frequency-based format and know exactly how many members of your team marked strongly agree to that statement, neutral, or disagree. So we've addressed some of the challenges of typical team building, and then the question for us becomes, okay, if you want to take it beyond typical team building and have that sustainable competitive advantage for teams, how do we go about setting up teams for success? How do we overcome those bigger systemic issues underlying the complexity of teamwork and help people work together towards a common goal? And in order for team building to become teamwork to become a competitive advantage, it's really important for organizations to define and measure what members of high-performing teams actually do, and then embed and cultivate those practices in teams in a consistent manner. So we at 3D Group developed the Team Navigator Approach, an assessment tool and process, because what we did is we recognized that aha moments that individuals have during 360 feedback and coaching, and also in particular during team discussions of 360-degree feedback results with the right level of support. The Team Navigator process leverages 360 feedback methodology. And we've worked with thousands of team leaders to act on insights regarding their individual effectiveness using that powerful kind of combination of rigorous 360-degree feedback and coaching. And what we found is that when we did 360 feedback and coaching with an intact team, that we were able to positively impact team effectiveness and group dynamics. We helped the team leader understand what are the developmental needs of both individuals on that team and what are the issues impacting the team as a whole, and getting some insight into that. The Team Navigator feedback process takes that a step further. So it is a little bit different from a pure 360 in the fact that it's inwardly facing. It focuses on team member perceptions of the leader and team members' perceptions of one another. And so in that regard, everyone on the team provides both quantitative and qualitative feedback to their teammates and leader, and everyone is both a rater and receives individual feedback. So let's take a look at the Team Navigator model. The specific factors measured in the Team Navigator assessment are grounded in considerable research on team effectiveness and our 3D's experience working with leadership teams. The survey content is based on a proprietary team effectiveness model that has 3 dimensions. So dimension number 1 is purpose, 2 is people, and 3 is climate. And we use this model to evaluate the health and alignment of your teams, and the assessment involves both a team and individual approach. Specifically, our assessment measures the degree of alignment around the team's purpose and the degree to which team members agree that every other team member is really bought into the mission and the vision of that team, that they're committed to the team's work, and that there's clarity and agreement around what decision-making processes and what team members' roles are comprised of, as well as if each team member has specific, defined, measurable goals and metrics that link back to the overall results or the shared deliverables for that team. High-impact teams are comprised of people who attach importance to heterogeneity and really take the time to understand and appreciate one another's individual differences as well as similarities. So the assessment measures the degree that team members view one another as being skilled, being competent, and if their individual expertise, perspectives, and viewpoints are valued. We also assess perceptions of team members' results orientation and the level of enthusiasm that they have for work, as well as the level of confidence in their leader and the leadership behaviors demonstrated by all team members. Last but not least, we look at climate, and climate is the shared perception of the kind of behaviors and practices and procedures that are supported within a team. So in other words, it's kind of like, how do things get done in this group? The Team Navigator assessment measures the level of trust that exists between team members, whether or not team members keep confidences, whether they follow through on commitments, and if they demonstrate caring for their fellow team members. It also measures communication practices, or the degree that communication is transparent and open, whether or not dissenting points of view are surfaced and discussed openly. And then last but not least, how do those team members deal with conflict, which tends to be a common and central issue to teams? So every team is going to experience friction or tension. And the question becomes, is that friction fruitful? Does conflict further the results or outcomes of the team? Is it productive conflict? And so what we know is that high-performing teams take joint accountability for the team's climate. They remain respectful during conflict, and they're willing to both collaborate and compromise to find the best solutions. So one of the questions that you're probably asking at this point is, what kind of teams are suitable for the Team Navigator process? And what we'll tell you is that the Team Navigator is best suited for intact senior leadership teams. And these tend to be the teams that are composed of influencers and decision makers who really work on the long-term vision and high-level initiatives for the organization. And while they may not be executing day-to-day projects, they probably are supervising or leading the people that are. So in terms of positions and business models, what you might see is this is a CEO or an executive director in the not-for-profit world and his or her direct reports. It could also be a functional vice president and a team of directors or senior managers, or maybe even a general manager of a manufacturing plant or division. One of the questions that we often get asked with Team Navigator is, well, can you use this with project teams? So let's first just kind of make sure that we're grounded in what a project team is. So project teams act on that mission to deliver awesome work to their customers, and they're typically doing things like shipping new product features, delivering tactical projects, or even launching a new product or service into the marketplace. So what we say about the project teams are that they could be suitable for Team Navigator if they meet a couple of key conditions. And so one of those primary conditions has to do with the team leader. Does this project team have a recognized team leader that really can influence people, purpose, and climate? Meaning that, do they have responsibility for broad vision? Do they have control over team composition? Who's on or off the team? We also look at whether or not the team membership is stable, meaning that they've had the time together to actually be able to assess one another, provide valid feedback, and observe the behaviors that we have in question. The third thing that comes into consideration under project teams is, are they a manageable size? And so we know that project teams can be quite large, and there really is kind of an optimal number in terms of the kinds of team behaviors that we're assessing with Team Navigator, in the fact that, again, we want people to have frequency of encounters and exposure to be able to assess against that model of people, purpose, and climate. The other type of team that we get questions about is service teams. And so whether those service teams are technical or non-technical, really what service teams are about is high volume and quality response. So the work on a service team tends to be queue-based, and they're likely working towards a daily, maybe even a weekly outcome. And what we will tell you is that service teams tend not to be well suited for Team Navigator, because the work is really done in sequence or in parallel. And so they may not be, they don't have that level of interdependency on each other to actually get the work done, right? All the parts need to fit together. The other thing about service teams that would impact the ability to implement Team Navigator is that service teams tend to be quite large. So if you think about like maybe the call center scenario that's represented by the team in the lower right quadrant on your screen. So again, Team Navigator is really best suited for intact, meaning that their work, that they're going to be a team over time, that their work is interdependent, and they have joint responsibility for mission, purpose, and outcomes. So now that I've talked a little bit about the Team Navigator and the foundation for the assessment, what I want to do is kind of just share what the consulting sequence or what the consulting process looks like at a high level. So, pardon me, one team that improved team performance with the Team Navigator is the HR leadership team at the Andersons. And the Andersons is a great little company that's headquartered in Ohio, and it's a multifaceted agriculture business. And as we talk about kind of some of the details of the Team Navigator process, I want to kind of give you some insights that we learned from the Andersons and tell you a little bit about the challenges that they were facing as a team, so that it gives you an idea of thinking about, well, when should I deploy a Team Navigator process? What's going on that would lead me to think that this is a good solution? So the history of the Andersons is that HR leaders at the Andersons had been embedded within business units. And then each of those leaders of HR leaders of the business units really had a lot of autonomy or independent functioning in terms of how to manage HR services and policy based on the direction of the individual business unit that they were in. And so some of the things that they were deciding and implementing, the practices that were different from business to business unit were things like, how do you manage overtime? How does vacation accrual work? And what does educational assistance look like for the employees in this particular business unit? So the Andersons had undergone a shift in their leadership. So they had a new CEO come on board in 2015, and they subsequently, a little bit later than that, had a new vice president of human resources join that organization. And in early last year, early in 2019, what the CEO and the HR VP did was really make a shift, initiate a shared services model of HR. And that required the HR leadership team to collaborate with their peers in really new and sometimes challenging ways. Some of the initial tasks of that HR team at the Andersons were to standardize policies and procedures across those business units, to lower HR operating costs, and in general to just increase the quality of service from the HR function as a whole. And some of the members of the HR team had been with that company, been with the Andersons for over 20 years, while other members of the HR team, much like the HR VP, were new and maybe had only been there 10 months. And there wasn't very little tenure in between. So that shared services model really put people into new roles. The team had been focusing on role clarification and alignment around shared values and principles, but communication was strained. And there were some real business challenges that needed to be faced by this group head on, but no one wanted to be perceived as like either uncooperative or difficult. So a lot of the tensions within the team stayed below the surface. Now, the HR VP knew that the leadership team needed to lead the change effort from within inside their group, and that in order to accomplish all their objectives, that the HR leaders had to really open up and share their concerns, share their ideas for how the organization could move forward, and work through some tough issues together. When we began our consulting engagement at the Andersons, we started working with the HR Vice President, Valerie Blanchette, and worked with her to really communicate what is the needs for behind team building, the Team Navigator process, talking about how the data was going to be collected, what data was going to be collected, how it was going to be used, and making sure that people understood agreements around confidentiality, meaning that the data would be presented in aggregate form only, that individual responses would not be shown or shared with anyone, and that in terms of examining the team's effectiveness and functioning overall, that we were really talking more at the theme level and not sharing anybody's individual responses to that. So all team members were oriented to the Team Navigator approach, so that again they understood what is the data that's being collected, and the agreements around confidentiality and anonymity, and what was going to happen as a process overall. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the Navigator approach from a process perspective, and I'll walk you through the approach that we used with the Andersons, which would also be the approach that we would perhaps use with your teams. So after we kick off the process and orient the team, we continue with collecting feedback. So what we do is we use online surveys, again, leverage 360 feedback methodology to have team members provide feedback to each individual member on their team and then the team leader. So once we've collected that data, we provide each team member and the team leader with a feedback report and coaching support to help them understand their individual contributions on what's helping team effectiveness and team functioning, and what behaviors that they're exhibiting or maybe not exhibiting that's presenting barriers to team effectiveness overall. We also take this data and look at it in aggregate and does a team level diagnostic to provide clarity on the team itself. So what aspects of the team work well, and again, which aspects of the team are preventing or getting in the way of being a high impact team. So once that individual coaching is complete, we move towards a team retreat. And the goal of that team building retreat is really to help individuals and the whole team make commitments around new ways of working together to support high performance. The topics of the team building retreat are completely customized to your team, and they're based on that diagnostic framework of the Team Navigator approach. And what we do is we use data to really identify what are the 1 to 3 critical actions that are needed to create a high impact team. Every team retreat tends to be different in terms of what are the issues that emerge or float to the surface for them. And that can be obviously tied back to business conditions, like I referenced at the Andersons, where you have the dynamics of long tenured team members versus these or very short team members, and learning how to talk about past practices of the organization without offending anyone as being like a central issue for that team. I've also worked with teams where they're newly formed, and what they've done is just kind of bumped up against those norms or implicit behaviors that they're developing as a team, and use the Navigator approach to really create an aspirational viewpoint of what the team should be looking like and understand how to move towards high performance. So one of the things about 3D Group is that 3D Group actually stands for Data-Driven Decisions. And we are really committed as a consulting firm to use data to inform our work. And so the Team Navigator model uses multiple streams of feedback and data that we collect throughout the entire process. So we start with the leader and conduct an intake interview to really help us understand what are the key business drivers, what are the challenges, and what is that take on group dynamics from his or her point of view. We also have the individual view that's collected through the assessment tool that helps individuals understand their reputations, what are their strengths, and what are their opportunities to contribute to team effectiveness. We also use the survey and the coaching data and conversations to come together and create a group level report, which is essentially a narrative of what are the strengths and development opportunities for that team as a whole. And as mentioned, we also work closely with the leader to help him or her understand how to leverage their positional power and identify what are those critical actions that he or she could take that would improve team effectiveness or functioning overall from their role, their position. So the Team Navigator process is distinct in that the assessment utilizes a side-by-side rating methodology. And in this case, you see a question listed here. This individual helps the team identify opportunities to improve as a whole. And each member of the team, these are made up names listed here, but each member of the team is able to concurrently calibrate their ratings for all team members when they look at that survey item. So the rating format in and of itself really encourages the rater to make comparisons between how he or she is perceiving behaviors of their team member and provide those ratings. So in addition to the Likert type scale questions or items that you see here on the screen, we also have open-ended comments that you can provide to each of your team members. And the question takes the form of an improvement-oriented question, which is what could this person do differently to help the team be more effective? And a strength-based question, which is how does this person help our team succeed? So in addition to this survey where you're doing your side-by-side ratings of your team colleagues or your team members, you also have a separate survey that is geared towards the leader, contains slightly different content. And that content reflects that the team leader's role is different. So the team leader is responsible for setting the broad direction, vision of the team, for holding the team accountable for results, and to a large degree, shaping the culture or the climate of the work group, the team itself. The items in the team leader survey have really been tailored to fit the leader's role and responsibilities. So what we know is that delivering feedback and coaching together is a powerful, powerful combination, and it can create the right conditions for behavioral change. And so we baked that into the Team Navigator process. Again, each individual receives a confidential report. It graphically displays their peers' anonymous ratings on those survey items and contains verbatim comments to the 2 open-ended questions. And then in addition to that report, they get an hour of coaching with the 3D group consultant. And the objective of that coaching session is really threefold. So one, we have, we're industrial organizational psychologists. We are happy to entertain questions around the mechanics of the report, how the data comes together. We can look at the patterns that are in the data so that they can turn that into information that they can act on and really understand what are they doing from an individual level that helps and measures team effectiveness. We also coach them towards strategies and actions that they could take to address those developmental priorities. And during those coaching sessions, what we're also doing is we're exposing them to the team retreat and getting their take on group dynamics and ensuring that they come to that retreat prepared to participate and ready to share their individual commitments to the team and what they personally, what actions they're personally going to take that would improve team effectiveness. So this is a snapshot of what the individual report looks like. The items here reflect the Team Navigator model, the behaviors associated with high impact teams. And as you can see, the data is anonymous, but individuals do see how they've been rated by their team members so that they can use this feedback to improve how they function within the team. In the Team Navigator process, we coach the team leader last, and the goals of this coaching session are, one, to help the leader understand his or her feedback, and two, help them understand what are the actions that they can take as team leader that are going to drive team effectiveness or team functioning overall. We also give them a preview of what are the team dynamics as a whole, what does that group level data look like, and begin to work with the team leader and prepare them for their leadership role in the team retreat. So the process is designed to create team accountability and new ways of working together. And in the one-day retreat, we use a variety of interactive exercises to really kind of help the team work through their top challenges, again, which are unique to that particular team. So that might include everything from facilitated discussions to role plays to simulations to games. Yes, we like to have fun too, case studies and the like. And one of the things that we do in that, as a stopping point in that team retreat, is that we do look at individual accountability. The retreat is geared to explore, define, and operationalize both team commitments and individual commitments that sustain high performance. And so we typically have the team members respond to these questions. They have an opportunity to talk about what are the strengths that they bring to the team. They have an opportunity to say, what do they need from the team and team members in terms of their exchange and how they interface with their colleagues. And then we also have a question, which is helping that team member understand and get their information on what does the team need from me vis-a-vis my role or my membership in this group. So what we know is that this opportunity to create individual commitments is important. So individual commitments. A lot of times when you're in team building, and having facilitated and participated in a lot of team building myself, what we typically do is we drive the group towards group level commitments or group level is that whole topic of how do you deal with conflict, and particularly conflict that you might be having with a fellow colleague or team member. And you might create a norm or facilitate a norm within the group that goes something like this. So we agree not to engage in triangulation, meaning that if any of us experiences conflict with another individual on the team, we agree that we'll go work it out with that other person first and resolve that issue or attempt to resolve that issue before we go discuss it behind their back with another team member, escalate it to the boss, or other kind of destructive behaviors that we see on teams. So what we know is that those group or team level commitments are critical, they're necessary, they're beneficial, but the team also benefits from making commitments at the individual level. And again, where each team member examines their individual behavior and comes back prepared to discuss in the team retreat what are the 1 to 3 developmental priorities that they have, that they gleaned from their data, and shares them with the team. And what you see here on the screen is a sample of items that came out of the Anderson's team building retreat. So for this particular individual, they were having some real challenges and getting feedback around being able to deliver products and services on time, to basically meet deadlines, meet commitments that they had made to their fellow team members. And so one of their individual commitments was really around, hey, look, I got to have, I'm going to schedule some desk time where I can work uninterrupted, and I know that I need to keep essential projects moving. So a low level of commitment, but a very important commitment. This individual also was getting feedback that they needed to be more assertive or speak up and speak out about their experience, their ideas for improvement. And so this individual was making a commitment to be more assertive to get his or her points in, as well as periodically and mindfully seeking feedback from their team members and making a commitment to ask others, what do you need from me? And being really clear on what was the deliverable, the agreement, or service that they needed to provide to their colleague. So you can see that the Team Navigator really kind of goes beyond typical team building. And we're not knocking anything on the typical team building list, but what we do think is that the Team Navigator really takes it a step further. And so while, again, personality tests and assessment are useful, they're useful in understanding style in a generalized way. But what we think is the Team Navigator actually gives more pointed, more targeted individual behavior feedback around a model of team effectiveness. So it is really how they operate. What do they do that helps or hinders team effectiveness overall? We believe that you get additional power by assessing the individual team members that you have. Again, remembering there's an I in team, and that I is individual, and that you get finer, more granular or precise data when you use the individual as the unit of assessment versus the team as a whole. Every team member gets coached. It's more common in typical team building to have every member be interviewed. And this is different in Team Navigator in terms of everybody's getting data and they're getting help on how to integrate their data and understand their impact on the team, and being able to come back and again make those team and individual commitments overall. So prior to jumping to question and answers, I want to pause here and acknowledge that as leaders or consultants, you're probably here on this call because you're looking for a team development solution that's going to address your organization's business challenges. And so we really would enjoy having an opportunity to provide you with an innovative solution, something that's credible and can make that competitive advantage in teamwork. And so if you want to talk about your goals, maybe you have a current team in mind that you think this is a good product for, or anything along that. Maybe you're here to explore in the marketplace. So what we would like to do is just invite you to a free, no pressure consultation to determine if Team Navigator is right for you. And before I turn it over to Jessie, just to let you know that Jessie's going to be sending out a link to today's presentation, a little bit more information on how to connect with us, and now I'll turn it over to you, Jessie, for Q&A.
Thank you, Anne. So first question we have is, how long do you anticipate this process taking from start to finish? What does the timeline look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually, let me look. I think I have a slide on this. So what you can see by looking at the slide is that we're estimating that this is about a 7-week process from start to finish. And so if I define that, the beginning is really, again, setting the stage for success, orienting the team on what the team building process and team navigator is going to look like, talking about the data collection and their role, and making sure that we do a thorough intake with the team leader, all the way to administering the surveys, doing the coaching, developing that custom retreat, delivering it, and then what we think is really important, because team building is really a process, not an event, is to also take a look and say, what are those supportive measures that we can take after the retreat, whether or not that's coming back into the team to reassess progress, see how the team is doing on those individual commitments, and perhaps even planning more activities with the group overall.
Okay, this looks like sort of a follow-up question. What does a time commitment look like for the individual team members, and how often would you recommend that that a team goes through this process?
Yeah, so if we look at, and just kind of using this timeline that's on the screen as a foundation for that question, I would say that you are probably looking at, I would say probably 12 hours of an individual team member's time. So let's take off the team retreat. So that tends to be, probably like a 7 to 8 hour endeavor. So that's a huge chunk of time in terms of participating in that team retreat. Outside of the day that you're spending in a team retreat, there is probably an hour orientation session that we usually do via web-enabled or collaborative meeting tools such as GoToMeeting, WebEx, etc. And then as a team member, the additional time is really spent in that survey process. And what we found over time is that team members take that process very seriously. And that whole process of kind of calibrating your ratings that I showed you, which is you're doing those side-by-side ratings and you're thinking and reflecting about how does this person show up versus this person, takes time. And so we would suggest that team members allot probably 2 hours to complete those surveys, with the understanding that they can come in and out of the survey system. You don't have to sit there and do it all at once. But it does take time to rate 12 people, like up to 12 people at once. And again, part of this is going to depend on how big your team is too.
Okay, so our last question is, how do you assess leader competencies? Could you say a little bit more about what the team leader process looks like?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the presentation, we use a separate survey to assess the team leader. And that survey really is designed to center on what are the unique aspects of the team leader's role. And so again, if we kind of think about the team navigator model, what the team leader is responsible for, that is really what is the purpose of the team, what is the mission, and clarifying roles within the team. So is every team member necessary? Do they have a full job? Do people understand what the accountabilities of the roles are, as well as the team leader provides just the overall climate of accountability within the team itself. And so the team leader survey focuses in on really what is the leader drive across those 3 dimensions of purpose, people, and climate.
Okay, thank you, Anne, and thank you all for joining us and for your thoughtful questions. If you have other questions that we didn't address here today, feel free to reach out to us at 510-463-0333. You can visit our website, www.3dgroup.net. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.